An elderly vampire, with a sign around his neck begging for blood, is on the street. Due to thirst, he reaches out to pedestrians. Then, a pair of steel pliers clamps his neck, held by a police officer. The pliers give off an electric shock, making the vampire convulse and collapse. The surrounding vampires are used to this and show no reaction. In a future world, a bat triggered a catastrophic event. 99% of the global population was infected by a mysterious virus, rendering humans incapable of surviving in daylight. Everyone turned into vampires, parasitic creatures living exclusively in the darkness of night. 10 years later, the government announced another failure in the research for a human blood substitute. Human blood became an extremely scarce and precious commodity. Only a few vampires could afford the luxury of purchasing blood coffee, while those who couldn't feed on blood became primitive creatures hiding underground. After passing through the identity verification channel, Ed entered the company for work. When the elevator opened, he saw the world's largest human blood farm. Tens of thousands of unconscious primitive humans were imprisoned on machines. As the last surviving humans in the world, their blood was the company's most expensive commodity. They were bred and had their blood extracted through neck-attached devices. This blood supply sustained the vampire world. Every time Ed saw this horrific scene, he couldn't calm down but was helpless. As the chief blood expert, he could only speed up the research on a substitute for human blood. In the conference room, with vampire leaders from various countries watching, a screen showed a vampire death row inmate used in a blood depletion experiment. The experiment showed that after abstaining from human blood for a month, the subject's body changed. First, the ears became pointed, then the brain lost its thinking ability, and finally, the creature turned into those primitive monsters driven only by the desire for blood. The vampire leaders present were alarmed. With human numbers now less than 5%, the remaining blood could only sustain until the end of the month. If a substitute for human blood wasn't researched soon, all vampires worldwide might turn into these monsters. Although human blood substitute experiments had just been stable in animal trials, under the leader's strong insistence, human trials began. As Ed injected the human blood substitute into the experimental vampire, at first, the man's condition seemed stable and the body data was normal. The leaders were hopeful, but as the substitute was continuously injected, the man's body temperature began to rise rapidly. Just as Ed asked about the man's feelings, the next second, the man vomited violently. His body convulsed uncontrollably and his temperature soared. This was beyond everyone's expectations. With Ed injecting human blood serum quickly, the frenzied vampire gradually calmed down. Just when everyone thought it was over, the man's head suddenly exploded. The new human blood substitute failed once again. After leaving the company, Ed looked at the dwindling number of humans inside the glass with mixed emotions. On his way home, he felt his ears were uncomfortable and saw on the screen that his ears had stiffened because he had refused to use human blood for a long time. Instantly, a car swerved into the opposite lane and bright headlights appeared in front of him. Although Ed narrowly avoided a collision with the oncoming car, the other vehicle lost control and hit a nearby building. Ed desperately braked and stopped before hitting a spiked barricade. He got out of the car. Unexpectedly, a woman with a crossbow came out and shot at him without hesitation. Holding the weapon, she forced Ed to back off. Ed realized they were all humans. Seeing they were about to shoot again, police sirens suddenly sounded in the distance. Ed immediately understood that they were avoiding the pursuit of vampire police. He hurriedly signaled them to hide in his car. In a critical situation, they had no choice but to follow the advice. As Ed activated the day mode, all the vehicle's windows were covered, and then he pulled the arrow out of his arm. After doing all this, the police car arrived. The vampire police questioned Ed. To be safe, the woman picked up her crossbow. She accidentally saw Ed's blood specialist work badge. The police said the other group was a few fleeing humans and asked if Ed had seen where they went. Only after confirming that the police had left did the humans get out of the car. The woman expressed her gratitude and then disappeared into the night with the others. Not long after returning home, the alarm signaled that the back door was opening. Ed's brother, Frankie, came to visit and put the birthday gift on the table. Ed tore off the wrapping paper and saw a bottle containing high concentration human blood. Frankie poured the fresh blood into a glass and wanted to congratulate his brother on his birthday. Facing what he had always resisted, Ed turned his head away. Ed still insisted on not drinking human blood, the two argued. Ed directly poured the precious blood into the drain. Seeing the valuable blood he had worked so hard to obtain being wasted like this, Frankie's anger erupted. He violently threw the blood bottle at the distant wall. Unexpectedly, a bloodthirsty monster entered the exit. The two men were terrified. The monster twisted its head continuously. Then it turned around, pressing its tongue against the blood-splattered wall and licking it frantically. Seemingly having not tasted human blood for a long time, it became extremely excited. Its claws left terrifying scratches on the wall. Frankie tried to launch a sneak attack. Hearing the noise, the monster roared and turned around. Its rough and terrifying body unfolded in front of the two men. The monster twisted its head, attracted by the blood, filled glass and started to suck it. I tried to draw a knife but failed in a panic. As Frankie was about to fight the monster swung its claws. Frankie was hit hard and fell unconscious to the ground. Ed quickly raised the chair and shouted desperately. Hearing Ed's cries, Frankie woke up. He picked up a nearby blade, pulled the table away for space. When the chance came, Ed and his brother attacked. Unexpectedly, the monster somersaulted and hung from the ceiling by its feet. Frankie rushed forward again and slashed the monster's chest. A large dark blood flowed out. He tried hard to cut until the head down. The monster fell to the ground. After a fierce battle, the two finally killed the monster. Afterwards, the vampire police came to the scene to clean up. They said this was the third home invasion in this month. It was estimated that the bloodthirsty monsters had escaped to the suburbs to look for human blood. Through the ring-on finger, the police identified the monster as Carl. Ed was shocked to hear that because Carl was a gardener he had known for many years. Searching the monster's body, they found many remnants of other vampire bodies. Not only that, there were bite marks on its arms, showing that it had been sucking its own blood. These actions sped up the mutation process. The next morning, just before sunrise, the alarm system reminded Ed that the back door had opened again. Ed cautiously approached the entrance. When he turned on the lights, he was surprised to see the woman he had met, holding a crossbow in front of him. The woman explained that she knew Ed had been researching a substitute for human blood, but that was just a method and couldn't kill the vampire's bloodthirsty instinct. Now she had found a way to solve everything permanently. She handed over a note with the time and location and then left. As the human blood supply continued to decrease, investors began to withdraw the humans stored in the company. Ed's company had lost the ability to supply blood to the entire country. The boss approached Ed, urging him to accelerate the research on a substitute for human blood. Ed tried to ask if the imprisoned humans could be set free if the study was successful. The boss flatly refused because even if a substitute for human blood was developed to meet the needs of ordinary vampires, those in high positions would still prefer the taste of human blood. The boss's response shattered Ed's illusion. After that, he drove to the agreed place during the day and risked exposure to sunlight. When he got out of the car, behind a tree, Ed met a bearded man with a weapon. But he didn't know that the woman on guard had been captured by the armed people who followed her. The bearded man pulled Ed to his chest and said bluntly that he was also a vampire. Ed found that unbelievable since the man had a heartbeat and could stand in direct sunlight without any issues. Just as Ed was about to ask how he achieved this, the woman, now being held hostage, was brought in front of them. The bearded man quickly aimed his gun at the enemy, and as the soldier opened his tightly secured helmets, Ed learned that the soldier was his brother. Ed hurriedly intervened. At this moment, a vampire team approached aggressively. The woman took the opportunity to break free and pushed Frankie into the sunlight. The bearded man quickly knocked Frankie unconscious. Ed hurriedly told the two to get into his car. The enemies were evidently well prepared. As Ed approached the driveway, he encountered a blockade. The armored vehicle continued to fire, severely damaging Ed's car. Through the bullet holes, most of the sunlight penetrated, and the enemy destroyed the monitor. Ed's car immediately lost visibility, and seeing this, the bearded man quickly switched to the driver's seat. They drove into the woods. Unfortunately, the armored vehicle had powerful off-road capabilities and was always in pursuit. Until they reached a small road junction, the third pursuit armored vehicle surrounded them. The bearded man knew that the broken bridge ahead was their last chance. In desperation, he could only fight for their lives. He drove the car straight through the guardrail, relying on the inertia of the chassis to frictionless spark on the tracks. In this thrilling manner, they reached the other side, while the pursuing armored vehicle was not so fortunate. One car unable to brake in time, pierced by the broken railway and flowed into the valley. In this way, the three narrowly escaped the pursuit and sped away. After hours of driving into the night, the bearded man drove the car to an abandoned bridge tunnel. He said he knew nothing about science and everything was accidental. Then he revealed to Ed his secret of transforming from a vampire to a human. Meanwhile, a vampire returned human blood coffee to the store. The cashier explained it was due to government restrictions on blood supply, reducing human blood content. They hadn't replenished enough blood over the years. The vampire was furious and expressed frustration. Seeing the cashier couldn't meet his request, he grabbed the blood packs. During the struggle, the blood packs were squeezed and blood splattered. When they tasted the blood, the vampires couldn't control their craving for fresh blood. The vampire police rushed to the scene, but even with the use of terrifying electric shocks, they could not stop the vampires who had completely fallen into madness. At this moment, reputation, status, and duties no longer mattered. All vampires fought fiercely for blood, and the order of the vampire society collapsed completely at this moment. On the other side, after Kists, Ed found the bearded man's blood sample under ultraviolet light was no different from other vampires. He couldn't understand why the bearded man had turned back into a human. The bearded man explained that the process was very strange. Due to the long absence of human blood, he lost consciousness and was in a daze while driving. The vehicle crashed into the lake railing. He was thrown up by inertia. Under sunlight, his body caught fire. He screamed and was thrown into the lake. Miraculously, after surfacing, his body was unharmed by sunlight. This accident unexpectedly turned him back into a human. They found Ed as they wanted him to recreate the process. Ed believed the key to changing blood might be in the intensity of sunlight. Then he noticed a nearby wine fermentation tube. Entering it, they found it airtight. They modified it for their purposes. At this moment, the rescue team retrieving humans had a flat tire on the way back and had to pause. The leader got out to check and found a tranquilizer dart. Everyone quickly picked up weapons and prepared for the worst. Suddenly, a large number of tranquilizer darts were shot from the darkness. With gunshots, the vampire forces hidden in the dark revealed themselves. Surrounded, the rescue team was caught off guard. Under the continuous rain of tranquilizer darts from all directions, the rescue team suffered heavy casualties and couldn't resist. The girl picked up a radio and informed the base. Subsequently, she was captured. Using the radio signal, Frank learned the location of the human refuge camp. At this point, all humans decided to evacuate. The bearded man urged Ed to retreat. Ed insisted that sunrise was near, and there might be no chance to do the experiment again. He had to finish it. Time was running out. Ollie adjusted the reflective mirrors. The bearded man draped a wet bedsheet over it. Everything was ready. With the bearded man raising the sunshade, a massive intense flame instantly engulfed Ed's body. Meanwhile, the armored forces were getting closer and the flames continued to burn Ed's skin. This time, Ed fully exposed his chest to the flames. The searing flames continued to burn his body until Ollie drew out all the flames at the right moment. At this point, the armored forces had reached the camp. As the heartbeat graph began to fluctuate, Ed took a deep breath and collapsed on the ground. Ollie approached anxiously to check, and to their surprise, Ed's eyes had indeed turned back to human. Meanwhile, the vampire team stormed into the building, searching for Ed. They opened the fermentation container, finding it empty. At the same time, the trio had already hidden in another wine barrel. The search yielded nothing, and the task force retreated. On the other side, the little girl was captured and brought to the boss's office. As the elevator doors opened, they locked eyes. The boss's expression was complicated as the girl was her long-lost daughter. Ignoring her pleas to release her companions, the boss embraced her. The girl fled towards the elevator. Only then did the boss realize her abdomen had been stabbed. Knowing her daughter detested vampires, the boss begged Frank to help. In the confinement room, Frank approached. The girl desperately pushed him towards the door, but couldn't resist the strength of a vampire. Frank's fangs sank deeply into the girl's neck. Later, the boss visited the prison to see her daughter. He was stunned. The girl, leaning against the wall, was covered in blood. And she turned around. It became apparent that she was sucking her own blood. The boss thought turning her daughter into a vampire would make her more accepting. But the daughter chose to transform into a primal monster to resist. Her daughter's frenzied actions shocked the boss. Due to the decrease in human blood supply, the price of human blood rose. Many vampires couldn't afford it. The population of primal monsters spread. The vampire government declared a state of emergency. The streets were deserted. Vampire forces began to capture the bloodthirsty monsters lurking underground. Thousands of vampires who turned into bloodthirsty monsters due to inability to afford human blood were sentenced. Shackled with iron chains, they struggled but were brought into the sunlight by armored vehicles. At the rear of the prisoner queue, a female bloodthirsty monster grabbed Frank. Although unrecognizable, Frank identified her as the little girl he had turned. The armored vehicles drove out. Vampires watching had complex expressions. Perhaps they worried about becoming prisoners. As the armored vehicles reached the sunlight, the bloodthirsty monsters were pulled out and ignited. Their roars and screams couldn't change their fate. One by one, they turned to ashes under the sunlight. Frank looked at the scene. The girl tried to look back. Perhaps Frank was regretting when the girl screamed hysterically in flames. Frank closed his eyes. The girl was incinerated and turned to nothing. After the flames, only chains were left. The vampire soldiers were excited. It seemed resolving the monster problem would bring back normality. In the evening, Chris returned home and saw Ed and others wishing. Chris, a blood specialist, couldn't believe his eyes when facing Ed, who had turned back into a human. Ed explained he'd found a way to become human again, and could cure all vampires if recreated. Just as Chris was about to ask how he did it, the phone rang. Chris took the call, facing the glass. Chris was defenseless against Ed. After minutes, there was no sound from behind the glass. Ollie went to check cautiously. Unexpectedly, a tranquilizer dart was shot from the darkness at the entrance. Ollie was taken away by force. Then, a fierce gunfight occurred between the two sides in the narrow house. Beard led Ed to escape through an underground passage in the chaos. After evading pursuit, a soldier saw where they went. The two went to a car shop. When he turned on the lights, a bloodthirsty monster hiding there was revealed. Seeing the approaching creature, an arrow pierced through its chest. It was Frank who followed them. The three confronted each other, reluctant to lower their weapons. Ed explained he had found a way to permanently kill vampires. Frank couldn't believe his eyes. At this moment, Frank, who hadn't fed on human blood for a long time, had pointed ears and a pale complexion. In the next second, he bit down forcefully. The beard bled profusely and fell to the ground in pain after being pulled away. Ed, disappointed, aimed the crossbow at his brother. Just as he was about to shoot, he saw something shocking and slowly lowered the crossbow. Later, Ed went to the company alone. Guards escorted him to the boss's office. At this time, Ollie, weakened by the boss's excessive blood consumption, looked extremely frail. Ed, with a fearful expression, said he had figured things out and no longer wanted to endure the hardships of being human. He proposed a deal, offering the method of producing a substitute for human blood in exchange for the boss turning him into a vampire. Ollie was surprised by its change. The boss dismissed subordinates and revealed blood supply issues for vampires during its absence. Citizens, military, and government were suffering from hunger. But now, with Chris having developed a substitute for human blood and the government mass producing it, those days are over. There was no need for a vampire antidote. Ed's expression changed slightly upon learning this. He then asked about the boss's feelings when he killed his own daughter. The wound was reopened. Infuriated, the boss sank his teeth into Ed's neck. A large amount of blood gushed out, saturating Ed's shirt quickly. However, after the boss finished drinking the blood, he felt no pleasure. Instead, he appeared in pain and lost strength. As Ed turned away, the boss realized that there was something wrong with his blood and hurriedly pressed the emergency button. It turned out that after Frank bit Beard Man, he reverted to a human boss, reacting strongly to Ed's blood, convulsed on the ground until his eyes returned to a human appearance. Ed explained that their blood was the cure for vampires. Meanwhile, a large number of vampire troops received the news and rushed to the company. Hearing the elevator, they aimed guns at the elevator door. But when it opened, they saw the bound boss. Facing the human boss, the starving vampire soldiers couldn't suppress their bloodthirst. They holstered their guns, rushed into the elevator, and extended their fangs to tear the boss apart like beasts. I thought he could avoid search by taking the stairs. However, upon reaching the lobby, he encountered vampire troops guarding there. Suddenly, vehicles rushed in and Frank jumped out to engage in a fierce gunfight with the troops. Just as they had barely dealt with the immediate foes, a large number of vampire troops arrived again. In no time, the three were surrounded. Faced with this situation, Frank helplessly looked at his brother behind him. Then, facing his former colleagues, who were extremely hungry, Frank tried to persuade them, saying he knew the antidote to end all this, and there was no need for unnecessary casualties. But the thirst for blood had already crazily taken over the minds of all the vampire soldiers present. Frank then chose to sacrifice himself. The vampire soldiers, with insatiable hunger, extended their fangs towards Frank. Frank was instantly engulfed in the biting of the vampires. At this moment, a soldier had rushed out, captured Ollie. I desperately tried to stop them, but he couldn't save anyone. Feeling the tearing on his body, Frank let out a hysterical scream. I had kicked open the door fiercely, wielded a wooden stick and stabbed it into the guard's heart. Ollie also fought back, picking up a blade and thrusting it into the guard's neck. The enemy was thoroughly defeated. I helplessly looked at the monitor. Frank had lost all sound. However, after feeding, the initial soldiers also turned back into humans. Faced with the low growls coming from the vampire soldiers behind them, the three of them instantly understood their predicament. But it was too late. The insatiable vampire soldiers couldn't stop approaching. Each one was like a hungry beast rushing towards the new prey. Facing the horrifying scene of blood everywhere, screams echoing and vampires' primitive instincts running wild, the social order of the vampire community completely collapsed. When everything was over, Ed and Ollie walked out of the control room. Bodies were scattered everywhere, and the scene was too gruesome to bear. Just as Ed found Frank, already dead, in the pool of blood, and before he could settle his emotions, gunfire erupted. Chris appeared with a gun, and in an instant, he mercilessly killed all the surviving humans present. Chris said vampires couldn't be cured as he had painstakingly developed a substitute for human blood. Just as he was about to kill Ed and Ollie, a crossbow arrow pierced through and flames erupted from his chest. It was Beardman who arrived just in time. With the sun gradually rising at this moment, Ed knew that everything had just begun.